Add the names to Marcus Walker and Michael Badgley to the Florida State-Miami kicking lore in their great rivalry. Mark Rogers TV just minutes after Florida State won another one over the Canes, 20-19. Instant analysis for you. And my first point in this one is why Mark Richt did not kick an onside kick, trailing by 1 point with 1:38 left in the game. So, Brad Kaya up top to Stacy Coley brought the Canes within 20-19. It was after a Braxton Berrios punt return of 43 yards down to the Florida State 16-yard line. Kaya up top on the fade to Coley for the second time in this game. Stacy Coley 7 receptions and 80 yards, and the 2 over-the-shoulder catches from Brad Kaya. Okay, Florida State 20-19. You assume that the extra point is going to be made, especially from a kicker in Michael Badgley, who had made 72 consecutive extra points. But DeMarcus Walker blocked the kick, so it was still 20-19. Florida State seemingly had won the game. Well, there was still 1:38 left on the clock, and of course Miami was set to kick off. So what Mark Richt chose to do was to kick it deep, pin Florida State back at its 15 to 20 yard line, and then call 3 timeouts, assuming that Florida State was going to run the ball and that his defense was going to stop those runs and force a punt with, let's say about $1:10 left in the game, about 70 seconds left in the game. His team gets it back with about a minute left to play on the punt return. Okay, the reason I would have gone for the onside kick, twofold. Number one, teams that are not expecting the onside kick are far more successful than are teams' defensive coverage units that are not expecting it. So, obviously, the Florida State coverage unit was expecting a possible onside kick, therefore they were geared up for it. But those kicking teams in those situations still get it 20% of the time. So you've got a 20% chance of getting the ball back with 90 seconds left on the clock to drive for the winning score. Okay, if you don't get it, yes, Florida State's got great field position, but they're not needing great field position. They're trying to run out the clock. So they've got the ball at the 50-yard line, and they're just going to run and be conservative. So you've got a 20% chance of keeping the ball on the onside kick. If you don't, you set up Miami right there at the 50-yard line, and you're going to get a punt anyway if you stop them, and you're going to be at around the 15 or 20-yard line for a long field to try to kick the field goal. So 20% chance you get it anyway, or you force the punt with just a little less advantageous field position by about 35 to 40 yards, but you only need a field goal to win the game. I believe Mark Richt should have went for the onside kick. All right, keys to the game here included Deondre Francois, battered and beaten, coming back with a big second half after the Canes had completely shut down the Noles in the first half. Francois 11 of 13 for $152 in the second half. After trailing 13-3. The Florida State defense has not looked like a typical vintage Florida State defense this year, but held Miami, the number 1 rushing team in America, against not the greatest opponents through 4 games, but nonetheless, Mark Walton and Joseph Yearby have been spectacular in the early going of this season. The Florida State defense held Miami to 62 yards and 2.2 yards per carry. Okay, Florida State, this is not going to be a championship season, most likely, but they've got a chance to get back into the top 10 eventually, and they've got Wake Forest coming up on the 15th, and then they may not be ready for it, but Clemson in 2 weeks. But the way the Tigers have played recently, and especially the game against Louisville and BC and winning 56-10, they will be a decided underdog, will FSU. For Miami, they begin a very difficult stretch with this game, the loss. North Carolina, Virginia Tech, who has suddenly woken up under Justin Fuente, Notre Dame, which turns out to be the easiest of the stretch, and then Pitt. So Miami may rack up some more losses. I believe this is a different team, a different program under Mark Richt. Good hire. I know that they lost this in similar fashion than they had previous Florida State games in recent years, but they didn't blow this game. They didn't choke it away. They were beaten by a little bit better team, and the Canes' still glaring issue is the offensive line. They couldn't run it. They couldn't protect Brad Kaya most of the night. My take, Florida State, Miami, right here on Mark Rogers TV.